Hello and welcome to Rappler Talk. I'm Sophia Toma Cruz, and today we are here with Dr. Maria Consortia Quizon, who sits on the National Immunization Technical Advisory Group for COVID-19 vaccine epidemiology. Today we're going to discuss the country's recently launched booster rollout. Thank you for joining us today, Doc. I'll just dig right. I'll dive right in. So after months of debate, the first question I want to ask you is after months of debate, the Philippines has finally cleared the use of COVID-19 boosters, starting, of course, with health workers and seniors. As someone who sits on the expert groups who have deliberated on this, what does the data tell us at this point about why boosters are needed at the moment?
Okay, what does the data tell us? But more importantly, not only the data in the Philippines, but the experience globally is that uh, we need boosters or additional doses. Number one, for healthcare workers, simply because of the exposure, the kind of exposure that they have. Number two, for the senior, for this, initially we said for the elderly senior citizens, which is 70 and above. But pagdating dun sa implementation, we said, oh sige, all senior citizens. And then for the immunocompromised. Why is this? Bakit natin sila inuna? Is because uh, not necessarily because we think that their immunity is waning already, but in addition to that, the fact that they are immunocompromised, maybe the antibody or the immune response that is expected from their body didn't kick in as high or as optimal as the regular person, or the person which is not immunocompromised, and that is why uh, this subpopulation warranted an additional dose just to make sure that in fact they are protected.
Right, Doc. I want to ask you, that leads me to another question. We know that right now health workers and seniors are the ones who are eligible to receive a booster, but later on we expect that more groups will become eligible to receive an additional shot. What does this tell us about the current vaccine effectiveness of the shots that are available right now? Because we're
Right.
telling the
You
public
know,
that there's going to be an additional
it's
shot.
not really a question of, oh, they weren't effective pala, additional dose, you know. Remember that when we started vaccination early in February this year, all of the all of the available vaccines were on an emergency use basis, meaning not any one of them can in fact say beyond reasonable doubt that the effectiveness of our vaccine is 12 months. You know, nobody can say that because everybody is still like on studying or waiting to see if in fact gal ang bisa ng vaccine na yon. So given what we have now, what we know in the past months, all of them said, okay, this warrants an additional dose. That is, are not singling out any brand of vaccine. We're saying all of the vaccines, whatever you took, would you would need an additional dose, and maybe later on a booster dose supply, and supply if supply is available. You know, when we say booster, it usually means something that will boost whatever you have. Um, when we started vaccination, most of the experts thought that it will take 12 months, 12 months, and then you need a booster. But right now, what our experience is showing us, 6 months lang pala, and then you need a booster. So it has nothing to do with saying, those vaccines are efficacious in the first place. No, we're just seeing more results as the months roll by.
Right. I want to ask you about, now that boosters are available, because we talk about it not necessarily saying that vaccines weren't effective to begin with, right? Like the data is just showing us that we're going to it would be good to have another additional dose. But if we're talking about what a vaccine is supposed to prevent, right? Like for example, it's supposed to prevent severe disease, hospitalization, and death. Um, the current two doses that we have right now still achieve that. So, what are we trying to achieve? Um, what are boosters going to do now for those who are allowed to get it? And what are we seeking to prevent by offering an additional shot to people? Is it infection, severe disease? What is it? What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bottom line is still prevention for hospitalization and deaths. Okay? So the reason why and I chose muna yung immunocompromised because that is easier to explain. You know, they are immunocompromised, when they got their two doses, we aren't 100% sure that they seroconvert. I mean, even with were their bodies able to produce enough antibodies to come to that level where it's protected. And that is the reason why we're saying that let's give them an additional dose or a booster dose just so they'll be better protected uh, uh, rather than just because, as I said, we assume that maybe their body get to that level of having enough protection. Now, for the health workers, it's by exposure that they have to the virus. That is why, okay, we need to give you the booster dose after 6 months.
What about for our elderly population? Because they're currently also eligible to receive an additional shot. And later
Yeah.
on, when we have more groups allowed.
Yeah, for the geriatrics group, we actually had a debate on this. It is not to say just because they're old, it means that their bodies are not working anymore, right? I mean, there are so many senior citizens or maybe far more healthier than both. Again, it's it's the same argument. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's the same argument that maybe their bodies may not have been able to raise the level of immunity that is expected of them, maybe because of the old age. And that is why I'm trying to qualify. That's why we said initially not just because you're senior citizen, doesn't mean that you're not healthy anymore, right? That's why initially we said maybe even the older senior citizens like 70 and above. But just to make sure, especially as um, available ang supply, during implementation, it's really senior citizens, the elderly seniors.
Right. Which I guess is also kind of why when the HTAC um, released a preliminary recommendation, there was also a prioritization framework again. So it wasn't like a free for all that we are allowing boosters. It also followed again the A1, A2, A3 priority.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
correct.
mhm. I want to talk a little bit about the decision making process behind deciding when to offer boosters, because in the Philippines you're aware, of course, that calls for boosters have been made months ago, and a lot of people were citing the experiences of other countries who have gone ahead, um, and also we also know for a fact, of course, anecdotally, we hear that other people haven't didn't want to wait for the go signal of the DOH, and they have gone ahead and just taken an additional dose anyway. So how is the government and its experts kind of balancing, you know, when they make their recommendations, the timeliness of these recommendations, while also sticking to what the data says, and
Yeah.
especially when, like I mentioned, you expert groups sit down and you debate, and sometimes there are conflicting views, and also the science is also always being constantly updated as the
Right.
pandemic evolves. Can you talk to us more about
Yeah.
that
And that
that
is the reason
balance?
why the vaccine experts, hindi na yata natulog. I mean, they have to keep on reading and reading and keep themselves abreast all the articles, that scientific articles that are coming out, each one with probably a different or an updated result than just a few days ago. One of the first steps that we had to consider is for yung emergency use, yung utilization, like the license that we have. Um, uh, we had to make sure that there's EUL for an additional dose. It means that because as of the moment, at the moment, it's like any product. A registered product would say you only have two tablets and then done. So it's not as easy as let's just give them three tablets. That's if that's not what the product is for, then we have to be very careful. So all the vaccine experts, all the other all expert groups, gathering and looking at the available data, this is the only time that we were able to recommend that we can in fact already give boosters to at least these subpopulations uh, based on the results of the studies that they have seen, not only in the Philippines but globally. And also, one important thing there is what also the expert group from WHO, or the recommendations of the WHO SAGE, that carried a lot of weight.
But if I'm not mistaken, right, Doc, that hasn't a full recommendation hasn't come out yet. We're still waiting for them to meet. Because they endorse it for seniors, and of course they said Sinovac and Sinopharm, those who got that should get one more shot. But for, let's say, the general population, there's no WHO SAGE recommendation on that, if I'm not mistaken.
None yet for the general population. I'm still speaking about our subpopulations, which
Mm,
are A1 and then A2, and then
and
those who are
immunocompromised.
immunocompromised. We're not even talking about A3 here, because just
Yes.
because you have a comorbidity doesn't mean that you are immunocompromised.
Hmm. I want to ask you a little bit about, you mentioned that the experts looked at the experiences of different countries as well. What did you see? What did the experts see there that really convinced them to, say, okay, let's offer boosters in the Philippines to these subpopulations?
Right. In many countries, what they see now, most or a big number of those who got severe long COVID are the unvaccinated. Next to the unvaccinated are those who have been previously vaccinated but are immunocompromised, or like really as I said, the seniors. So elderly seniors, and that is one of the reasons why it was recommended, or it was considered, that they have additional dose because of the possibility that really their bodies didn't reach as I said, the optimum level of protection with just the two doses.
Right. I want to ask, that brings an interesting point, because I think early on, of course, the question about whether or not a booster would be needed is something that experts have been tackling for many months now. And early on, and up until, to a certain extent, up until now, one really important argument against a wide rollout of boosters is, of course, vaccine equity. And in the Philippines, we've gone from, very strongly calling out this vaccine inequity up until a few months ago. And of course, you also know that the WHO said that offering boosters to like a large population, or maybe, yeah, would aggravate the situation. And then locally, you also have a situation where millions are unvaccinated still, or not fully vaccinated at the very least. So, I do you see these two things as conflicting, and how are we balancing these priorities? Reaching the unvaccinated, who you mentioned is always, we've seen, are the ones who make up the most number of severe cases, yet offering boosters at the same time.
Right. Well, we maintain and we still see to it that there should be equity. Okay? As much as possible, we still reach out to those who are unvaccinated. Now, as far we were ensured by our vaccine SAR and the IATF that there will be enough vaccine, even though we offer boosters to the particular subgroups, there will be enough. How many are we talking about? Healthcare workers, about a million, about less than 10 million if we're going to give boosters to all 2. So that's an additional 11 million if we are able to reach all of them. However, as it stands, I don't think we even got into anywhere near 100% of 8-2 for the
Mhm.
primary series. So what am I trying to say is that it will not jeopardize. Hindi makukulangan yung para sa mga primary series kung magbibigay na tayo ng booster para doon sa subpopulation na nangangailangan ng booster. Sa
Apologies,
Rappler,
slight technical difficulty. Sorry, Doc, you were saying, please continue. Um, we maybe we can start where we left off just to be sure. Yeah, I was saying, I was asking about how we're balancing those priorities and making, and if you see those two things as conflicting.
yeah. So as I said, it's not conflicting. We're still prioritizing those who weren't vaccinated yet. Okay, primary series. So dapat i-exhaust muna lahat ng paraan para nun maka-reach out tayo sa kanila, and hopefully this 3 days that the government set aside for bakuna would have boosted the number of people who had primary series.
Hmm. But Doc, it uh was the primary concern of experts just supply? Because we've had enough supply for quite a time now, right? But it hasn't necessarily translated to faster, to a wider coverage among seniors. So is it just about supply, or did the experts seek assurance for something else, like other efforts to make sure that those who need primary doses are actually showing up to the sites, or was supply just a concern when it came to balancing these priorities of offering boosters
Right.
but also
You know,
making
when you
sure those
say
are covered?
kasi, balancing of equity, when you talk about equity, it's like there's not enough and you're taking away uh, whatever for those who need it for the primary series. Now, if we have enough supply, then it theoretically we can still, there will be enough to go around. But then you are also correct. I think is, I don't know if we can call it vaccine heavy initially, because there are still places wherein we couldn't even reach 100% coverage for the A2 and the A3. Um, nandun naman sa kanila ang bakuna. So may equitable solution naman. Pero bakit walang takers? So I guess case, hindi equity ang issue doon, kundi more effort by the local leaders to see to it that the vaccines really get into the arms of the people, and not only for the leaders but also for the citizens to do their part and submit for vaccination, considering that they will not only be protecting themselves, but they will be protecting their fellow Filipinos doing so.
Right. Two different issues, but both equally important. I want to move on a little bit to, well, it touches a little bit on equity still, but it also involves, of course, a recent development that has worried a lot of people over the last few days is the WHO's designation of Omicron as a variant of concern. It's the first one after Delta, which we know is already highly transmissible. Up until then, it's been regarded as the fastest and the fittest variant of this virus. Some countries are now thinking about, okay, opening boosters to the general population. In the Philippines, where vaccines are Carlito Galvez Jr. mentioned, okay, maybe we have to consider opening the booster drive to economic frontliners, A4, who also make a pretty big part of the population. So, do you see that, you know, could this affect how soon boosters are allowed for other priority groups like A4, or
Yeah.
it's too early to tell at this point?
Too early, too early. If the reason is the Omicron variant, then too early to say that let's give everybody a booster because be there. You know, number one, kailangan muna nating ma-reach yung magka-full, at least magka-2 doses. Ang the DOH said our target is 70% of the 70%. Okay, so percent of our population is eligible as of that moment. So we are targeting 70% of that. Na maging fully vaccinated, then we have good protection. May laban tayo with whatever variant would come in.
Right. Doc, I want to talk a little bit about the urgency of getting boosted, right? Because now you have, there's a holiday season coming. You also have this threat of a new variant, and then the fact that COVID, I mean, the pandemic is still ongoing. So if I'm somebody who is eligible, how might eligible at this moment? How might I be able to measure my need for a booster? Based on some of the risks that I face, if it's not yet my time, like, should I be worried about getting boosted sooner? Is it okay for
Yeah,
me to wait? If I'm not yet eligible, should I still
right.
wait or should I try to seek that out?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you're not a health worker, if you're not senior citizen, and if you're not immunocompromised, you're with what you have with the double dose. Okay. Secondly, from day one, even with the double dose, even nung hindi pa natin we've been saying that vaccine is not the only protection that you should have. We should still practice public health standards like face masks and well, face shield. Wanan ka na ngayon kung naka-face shield ka pa rin. But at the end of the day, it's yung laban ng individual eh. If I feel so insecure, well, never mind if you laugh at me because I have a face shield. But I will do so because I want to protect myself. And then, even though we're so very tempted to go shopping and go to the malls and go to crowded places, please, we still have to be very vigilant and be protective of ourselves and not expose ourselves unnecessarily. So what I'm trying to say is that if your question is, paano ko yet may I enjoy a Merry Christmas? Yes, you still can because you have that protection if you are vaccinated, and you still have the other armas, like as the minimum public health standards in order to ensure that you're going to be safe.
Right. Um, while there's a lot of clamor for boosters, it's also really clear that there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered on its use and whether, I mean, when it might be really necessary for everyone. At this point in time, at the moment, are there any possible, or what do we still not know about boosters that we want to know? Are there for example, are there possible risks involved? Yeah, what are the unknowns at this point in time?
No, the unknowns is do we really need months at 1 year or at 2 years or 5 years? You know, let me just clarify with you what the booster and what an additional dose means. When
Mhm.
we doses, it means you are fully vaccinated. Okay, how long is that full vaccination going to protect us? So is it going to protect us for 1 year? If it's going to protect us for 1 year, then it means that you booster next year. Okay, on the other hand, what does an additional dose? Yung palang 2 doses, hindi pala talaga full vaccination pala yon in the first place. Ang kailangan pa 3 doses in order to be called fully vaccinated. We don't know that muna. Sabi mo kasi ano mga hindi natin alam. That is one of the things. Ba? Or booster dose ba? So even if you have the third dose to fully vaccinated, okay, how long is that going to protect me? Again, after having 3 doses to be called fully vaccinated, is that going to protect me for 1 year or 5 years? Siyempre, malalaman natin pagdating target kasi ongoing lahat ng mga resulta ng mga yan. So we would know sooner rather than later. So we're saying booster now after 6 months. But really, in the first place, hindi ko alam, maybe alam ng ibang experts, but I don't know if are are we really talking about now, or are we really talking about kasi kulang in is talaga yung 2 doses lang, baka naman in the first place kailangan doses, and we would know sooner or later.
Hmm. But is that the sense you're getting, Doc, that well, is that the sense you're getting, for example, are boosters going to be annual, or is this a 3 dose? Is the quote unquote primary dose like a regular regimen 3 dose?
Yun pa hindi natin alam kasi ang regular,
Mm.
we started this vaccination on the premise that the primary series is 2 doses lang. Hindi ba? And then we said, okay, the 2 doses and the best scientific guesstimate is that it's gonna last us for 1 year. So our booster is gonna be, let's say, March you're fully vaccinated. So ang booster mo will be March next year. That's what we thought. And maybe that is still true for the general population. But then again, sabi nga natin, by virtue of dito exposure ng A1, and because immunocompromised yung iba, nag-umpisa na tayo magbigay ng booster at 6 months. Maybe for the general population, it would still be next year.
Okay. As a final question, Doc, I want to ask you just to zoom out a little bit. What do we expect boosters to do for the pandemic at this point? The course of the pandemic, its trajectory, is it supposed to help um keep this under control? Is it mostly for the individual that they have more protection? What yeah, what might boosters effect have on the trajectory of this pandemic?
Will help prevent hospitalizations and deaths. Kaya nga in the first populations that we chose are those who are most likely to be hospitalized and who will die of COVID. Okay? So kung sasabihin mo, kung nag-booster tayo dito lang sa subpopulation na to, will it change the course of the pandemic? Probably not, but it will bring down our case fatality rate, definitely. And it will help, it will provide respite for our already hospital workers.
So in that sense, Doc, it's kind of the same. We're still working towards the same goals that we wanted to achieve with a primary vaccination series, which is to prevent severe disease, hospitalizations, and death. But now we're seeing that there are
That's
certain groups
correct.
where more work might be needed.
Yes,
Mhm.
because remember that none of the vaccines ever promised 100 or even 100% prevention against infected from the COVID. Nobody ever promised that at 100% you're promising is close to 100% prevention of hospitalization, prevention of the severe form. of the disease of COVID.
Right. Okay. On that note, we'll definitely be closely following the developments, especially as a new variant is, of course, in the news right now, and scientists are watching that very closely. We hope to have you again next time on the show, Doc. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Rappler Talk. Please join us again next time. I'm Sophia Tomacruz.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Doc.